Hi there, my name's Romy, and this story isn't just about betrayal. It's about what happens when your own family decides you don't count anymore. My parents signed over everything we built. To my brother. The house, the company. Even my mail was rerouted, without my knowledge. I was erased from family records, removed from our business history, and told to keep things civil. But I found something they forgot, the clause that changed everything. Now I'm wondering, if they could do this to me, what else have they been hiding all along? I wasn't supposed to drive down Timberleaf Drive that day. I was supposed to take the interstate home, straight from the client site, no detours. But my phone had buzzed with a road closure alert, and the reroute brought me down the street I'd grown up on, past the White House with green shutters that still carried my family's name. That's when I saw it. Cars lined both sides of the road, front yards packed with folding chairs, platters of catered food being carried up the walkway. A big white banner stretched across the porch rail, letters bold and proud. Celebrating Trenton's 10 years at Gaskins Contracting. Trenton. Not the Gaskins family. Not Ezekiel and Sons. Just him. I pulled over 2 houses down, engine still running. My hand stayed frozen on the wheel. The air conditioner hummed against the spring heat, but my chest tightened anyway. I scanned the crowd. Uncles, cousins, friends from church, people I hadn't seen since Dad's retirement party 5 years ago. They were all there. Everyone but me. No one had called. No text. No email. Not even a damn forwarded flyer. A decade ago, I was the one who'd rebuilt the logistics division after Dad's warehouse nearly folded during the 2020 crash. I poured my savings into stabilizing contracts, burned weekends, restructuring systems, stayed late filing permits no one else touched. And now, balloons, canapes, a DJ booth for my brother. They didn't just forget me, they planned to. I didn't cry, I didn't honk the horn, I didn't storm in demanding answers. I just sat there, numb. I watched my mother laugh in her coral blouse, arm around some church lady like she was the queen of Southern hospitality. I saw my dad raise a glass, voice animated as he gave Trenton the kind of speech I used to dream of hearing directed at me. I remembered repainting the office walls by myself the year we downsized. The ladder slipped. I bruised my shin so badly it swelled like a football. No one thanked me then either. They erased me. I shifted into drive and rolled away slowly, like peeling off a bandage you already know has infected skin underneath. My throat burned, but I said nothing. Back home, the sun had dipped low. I changed into an old hoodie, made tea I didn't drink, and slumped into my kitchen chair. Just then, my work phone buzzed. A forwarded email. Subject line, for internal use only, next week's press release. I clicked it open. Trenton Gaskins to officially lead Gaskins Contracting into the next era. As the sole legacy bearer, Trenton's dedication to the company and family values sets the foundation for our future. Sole legacy bearer. I reread it 5 times. There was no typo, no mention of Dad, no footnote, no me. So this wasn't just a party, it was a coronation. And I hadn't just been excluded. I'd been written out. A strange calm settled over me like fog. Not sadness, not even shock anymore. Something colder, sharper. I slid my phone across the table and opened the Notes app. Sunday, 3:42 p.m. Observed outdoor event at parents' house. No prior notice. Banner read, Trenton's 10 years. Spotted, Mom, Dad, Cousin Rick, church associates, Diane and Harold, unknown event staff. Forwarded internal company email confirms Trenton's sole leadership. I typed fast, mechanical, like I was logging evidence. They erased me like I was a typo. I whispered the sentence aloud just to hear it echo. It didn't sound angry. It sounded like fact. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spin slow circles above me. Somewhere between the 3rd and 4th hour, I remembered how Mom once told me, "Sweet girls don't make noise. We handle things quietly." I used to believe that made me strong. But now I saw the truth in plain daylight. Quiet girls get replaced. And the worst part? No one in that house had the decency to pretend otherwise. By the time sunlight crept into my apartment the next morning, I was already dressed. I hadn't slept, just waited. The email sat burned into my mind, every word of it. Sole legacy bearer. I couldn't unsee it. I made coffee I didn't finish and headed down the stairs toward my mailbox, even though I already knew what I'd find. Empty. Again. No bills, no bank statements, no IRS documents, not even junk mail. For weeks, I'd chalked it up to a fluke. Maybe deliveries were slow, or someone had misfiled a route. But this, after the party, after the email, this felt different. I drove straight to the USPS branch office a few blocks away, the same one I'd updated my address at last year when I moved from Garland. It was early enough that the line was short. The clerk behind the glass was a woman about my age, polite smile, badge reading Daria. I slid my ID under the divider and asked if she could check whether any mail had been redirected or held. She typed for a minute, then stopped. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she scanned the screen. It looks like there was a digital change of address form submitted for you a few weeks back. My stomach tensed. Submitted by me? No, she said, tapping something. It was digitally signed, redirecting all your mail to a residential address in Knoxville. I blinked. That's my parents' house. Her voice dropped a note. Name on the request is Trenton Gaskins. The room fell away for a second. And you're saying this form was accepted? She nodded gently. Yes, and the time for formal dispute has passed. I'm sorry. Of course it has. I stepped outside, the air suddenly too thick. I pulled out my phone and opened the USPS app. I couldn't log in. My credentials had been changed. Every attempt just led to access denied, account information not found. Back in my car, I stared straight ahead. This wasn't a coincidence. My mail hadn't been lost. It had been stolen, redirected by someone who didn't want me to see what was coming. The drive home was a blur of honking and red lights I barely registered. I tossed my keys on the counter, opened my laptop, and logged into the joint account I'd once shared with the company to help cover payroll during the lean years. The screen blinked. No account found under these credentials. I tried again, slower this time, same result. Then I noticed it, on the bottom corner of the page, access privileges modified 4 weeks ago. Modified by request of T. Gaskins. So while I was busy finalizing vendor contracts across 3 states, my brother had been wiping me off the books, paper by paper, login by login. I checked my inbox. No alerts, no notice, no warnings, because they'd gone to the wrong address, to his address. That night I sat with my laptop on the kitchen floor, the glow of the screen the only light in the room. I opened a new folder and named it Contingency. Inside I started building a digital paper trail, screenshot of USPS record, bank access logs, confirmation of internal email from the party day, notes on attendees, dates, times. I whispered to myself, this isn't passive neglect, this is active deletion. The kind of deletion that doesn't happen by accident. The kind you do when you want someone gone without making a scene. Then I remembered something Trenton once said when we were younger, and he locked me out of the family vacation rental for fun. If she can't get in, maybe she'll stop thinking it's hers. And now here he was, pulling off the same game, just with fancier tools. I wasn't crying, I wasn't yelling, I was archiving, and I wasn't done. I texted Cassie, a compliance manager I'd worked with 2 years ago during a contract audit. She'd always had a sharp eye and even sharper ethics. Me. Hey, can I ask something off the record? If I give you a routing code and a name, can you trace activity? A pause. Cassie. Depends. You think someone's moving things behind your back? Me. I think someone's rewriting history. 10 minutes later. Cassie. Romy, I don't want to say too much over text, but yeah, something's off. Get a lawyer. I backed up everything. Twice. One to the cloud, one to an encrypted flash drive. I labeled it Legacy Personal Use. Then I opened the browser and typed in my company's website. But before the homepage fully loaded, I saw something in the corner of the screen that made my chest seize. A new press release, featuring Trenton, smiling, holding a key, and beneath it, a caption I couldn't unsee. A family legacy, now in the right hands. The press release stayed with me like a splinter under the skin. I couldn't ignore it, couldn't shake the image of Trenton beaming, holding the ceremonial key like he'd earned it, like the past 15 years of my life hadn't happened. By Tuesday afternoon, I was standing in the lobby of Gaskin's Contractors. I hadn't been here in almost 2 years, not since I stepped back from day-to-day operations to expand our regional partnerships. The walls still smelled like lemon wax and fresh paint. I should know. I painted them. I spent an entire 4th of July weekend on a ladder with a roller in one hand and a bag of fast food in the other because Dad said the budget was tight and Trenton had plans. I walked toward the reception desk, my steps slow but firm. The front wall used to hold a bronze founder's plaque, etched with all 4 names: Ezekiel, Verna, Trenton, and me. I designed it. The font, the layout. I even chose the brushed finish so it would reflect sunlight just slightly, like it was alive. Now it was gone. A newer, shinier plaque hung in its place. But this one had only 3 names: Ezekiel, Verna, Trenton. My name had vanished without a trace. The receptionist, a young woman I didn't recognize, looked up and smiled politely. "Can I help you?" I almost laughed. "I used to work here." "Oh, cool, she prompted. I didn't bother answering. Instead, I gave her a nod and moved past toward the hallway. The door still required a keycard. Mine had been deactivated months ago, but I knew the timing of shift changes well enough. Just as an intern buzzed out, I slid through the door with him. Inside the marketing department, things were mostly unchanged. Open desks, gray dividers, that faint smell of microwave popcorn no one admits to making. I found an unused computer, logged in with a temporary guest ID, and pulled up the internal archive. I navigated to the Legacy Materials folder where my original plaque design files had been stored. Nothing. Empty. I clicked over to the file recovery log, heart thudding. There it was. File deleted, user, T_Malik, date, April 5th, Trenton's known alias. He didn't just swap the plaque, he deleted the proof I'd ever created it. I should have felt furious. Instead, it was something colder. Confirmation. This wasn't clumsy or coincidental. This was surgical. I leaned back in the chair, the office noise behind me fading into static. My mind didn't go to confrontation. It went to memory. Years ago, when I was 21 and still hopeful, Dad and I had unboxed the original plaque together in that very lobby. He'd placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "Your name means something here. You helped build this." And now? Now he stood by while my name was erased like a smudge on glass. I left the building without speaking to anyone else. Didn't storm out. Didn't make a scene. But as I walked across the lot to my car, I snapped a photo of the new plaque. Then I took another of the visitor badge with today's timestamp. Back at my apartment, I opened my digital folder. Inside Contingency, I started a new document. Subject, Intentional Identity Removal, Phase 2. Evidence of name removal from public display, screenshot of deleted archive files, user ID associated with deletion. Employee witness list from office log. Every entry was methodical, clean, sharp. If they weren't going to name me, then I'd name exactly what they did. And I wasn't doing it for closure. I was doing it for court. Before I shut my laptop, one last thought flickered. I opened the county's online property records for Knoxville, clicked through familiar forms, typed in our family's address. What I saw next froze me. Back in my car, I checked the deed registry, and what I found made my blood run cold. Wednesday morning came fast. Too fast. I hadn't slept more than a couple of hours, and yet I was already parked outside the Knox County Records office before it opened. My coffee had gone cold on the dashboard, untouched. I didn't need caffeine. I needed clarity. The county clerk greeted me with the kind of forced smile government employees wear like armor. I slid a slip of paper across the counter. "I'm looking for the current deed record for this address," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. She typed with methodical precision, paused, then tilted her head. "Looks like the current owner is Trenton Gaskins." I blinked. "That can't be right." She turned the monitor slightly so I could see. There it was, plain as day. Updated ownership filed 3 months ago. Sole title holder, Trenton. I asked for a printed copy, my hand already reaching for my ID. "And the notary section?" I asked. She pointed. "Signed and notarized on January 18th. My breath caught. That weekend, Dad had been in the hospital. I drove him there myself after he stumbled in the kitchen, clutching the counter like it was the only thing holding him up. Mild stroke, they said. 2 nights under observation, saline drip, speech slow and confused. I had the wristband to prove I'd signed him in. So how in the hell did he manage to sign over property on the same day? Outside the records office, I sat in my car, printed deed in hand. The signature looked close, but not perfect. I tilted the page toward the light and stared. The loops of the Z in Ezekiel were inconsistent with his usual style. The slant of the last name was sharper, less rounded. It felt mechanical, rehearsed. "That's not his hand," I said aloud, testing the truth on my tongue. But hearsay wouldn't help me. I needed someone who could place him, his condition, exactly where he was that day. I drove straight to Knoxville Medical Center. The elevator ride to the cardiac floor was excruciating. I kept pulling out the deed copy, scanning the date, memorizing every detail like it would mutate if I blinked. Angela Webb, the head nurse on shift that weekend, was in the staff break room when I found her. I remembered her because she'd been the one who brought us extra blankets and apple juice that day. She still wore her hair in the same no-nonsense braid. "Hi," I said, tentative. "You probably don't remember me. You brought in Mr. Gaskins. Middle-aged, beard, mild stroke, right?" I blinked. "Yes, that's my father." She nodded slowly. "He was with us 3 days, mostly out of it. Never left the bed." I swallowed. "Did anyone else visit him that weekend?" Angela shook her head. "Nope. You were the only one. He was barely responsive most of the time. Just muttering, you know? Meds make people foggy. And, hypothetically," I paused, bracing myself, "could someone like him have signed a legal document that day?" Her eyebrows lifted. "Legally? Absolutely not. He couldn't even hold a pen straight. I had to sign off on his vitals every hour." I nodded, heart thudding in my throat. Back home, I placed the deed side by side with older signed documents, Dad's old medical directives, birthday cards, even the note he'd scribbled for me on my first promotion. The difference was undeniable. I scanned all of them, labeled them meticulously, and created a new subfolder, Forgery Evidence Lake Transfer. Then I opened a blank document and titled it, Affidavit of Timeline Discrepancy, January 18th. I began typing like I was drawing a weapon. Subject incapacitated at Knoxville Medical Center. Signature on deed registered same day. No witness access during timeline. Prior handwriting samples contradict deed signature. This wasn't just a family betrayal anymore. This was legal manipulation. This was fraud, and it was time to call it by its name. The attic at my grandfather's house always smelled like dry wood, old insulation, and something vaguely floral, maybe from the cedar trunk he kept his military jackets in. I hadn't been up there in over a decade, not since before the arguments started, not since before everything fractured. But that morning, something pulled me up the creaky stairs, past the smell of dust and memory. I didn't know exactly what I was searching for. I only knew that the deeper I dug, the more undeniable their intentions became, and that somewhere, buried under boxes and time, was something they forgot to erase. I moved aside stacks of yellowing newspapers and opened every storage bin with purpose. 30 minutes in, under a rusted toolbox and a high school yearbook, I found a blue velvet folder, sealed with a gold clasp. It looked pristine, like it had been protected deliberately. Inside, a single sheet of paper made my breath catch. Addendum to the Gaskins Family Trust, executed and notarized. I read the clause 3 times to be sure I wasn't hallucinating. No asset within the Gaskins Trust shall be transferred, sold, or reassigned in part or in full without the written consent of Romy Elaine Gaskins until her 35th birthday. My hands trembled, not from fear, but recognition. This clause didn't just exist, it was binding, and it made every shady transaction over the last 2 years legally vulnerable. Tucked behind the document was a small USB drive. I rushed back downstairs, plugged it into my laptop, and held my breath. A grainy audio file began to play. Romy, if you're hearing this, then the storm hit. It was him, my grandfather, Jack Gaskins. His voice, slow but strong, crackled through the speakers. I knew it might come to this. That's why I put the clause in, not to divide, but to shield you. You were always the quiet one. You watched, took notes, read people better than they read themselves. And I worried, Because people underestimate quiet girls. They don't see the fire till it's on their doorstep. I covered my mouth. It felt like he was in the room. I couldn't trust your father to stay neutral, and I feared Trenton. Well, you know how he gets when he thinks he's owed something. That clause was never about favoritism. It was about fairness. It was about giving you the veto they'd never see coming. He paused. I didn't give you the title, Romy. I gave you the power. Click. The recording ended. And for the first time since the day of that party, I felt taller than the weight pressing down on me. This wasn't about being cut out anymore. This was about being put in, intentionally, legally, permanently. I printed 3 copies of the trust and notarized clause. One went into a fireproof box, the second into a new cloud folder I named Legacy Armor. I saved the audio as both MP3 and .wav in case they tried to discredit format metadata. I whispered into the silence. You gave me the pen before they even started writing me out. They thought they'd buried me under politeness and passive aggression, but they missed one thing. Buried things don't vanish. They get unearthed. By early afternoon, I had created a folder on my desktop. Asset freeze, pre-35 clause activation inside. I dropped the scanned trust clause, the audio transcript, notarization logs, and a side-by-side comparison of every financial move Trenton made since January. Every document was labeled with clean file names and backed up to 3 locations. I stared at the blinking cursor on a new draft email. The recipient, Norel Glass, a corporate attorney I hadn't spoken to since I left the logistics firm in Dallas 3 years ago. She was sharp, lethal in heels, and allergic to injustice. I typed 2 words, need help. Then I added, they're trying to erase me. I have proof. 5 minutes later, her reply came in. Call me now. I dialed. She picked up on the first ring. You good? She asked. I nodded into the phone even though she couldn't see me. I have the clause, the trust, an audio file, and proof of forgery. She exhaled. They want quiet. Let's bring noise. The next morning, just before the sky settled into its usual Tennessee blue, I was standing outside Stone Cafe with a folder under one arm, and every inch of my spine braced like steel. The text had come the night before. Let's talk. Neutral ground. Stone Cafe. No drama, please. Signed by my mother. They always loved that phrase, no drama. As if stealing legal rights and gaslighting your daughter into invisibility was somehow a quiet act. As if silence softened betrayal. I walked in and spotted them immediately. Trenton looked freshly pressed, teeth white, shirt collar crisp, like someone who just won an award and wanted the world to clap longer. Verna sat across from him, her palms folded on a floral napkin, eyes smiling like she hadn't gutted me 6 ways this month alone. Romy, Trenton stood, fake warmth spilling from his voice. You look, well. I didn't bother replying. I slid into the booth, laid the manila folder next to my water glass, and waited. Mom leaned slightly forward, voice syrupy and low, that rehearsed southern softness she used when scolding church kids or calming a tense potluck. I asked for this because I think things are getting out of hand. We're still family, baby. This doesn't have to become a mess. I stared straight through her. It became a mess the day someone decided I didn't exist on paper anymore. Trenton let out a small laugh through his nose. You're making it more dramatic than it is. We're just reorganizing. Reorganizing? I said, tone flat, by transferring property during a hospital stay and forging signatures? He blinked once, slowly. You don't know what you're talking about. I opened the folder. Inside was a printout of the veto clause, highlighted, dated, notarized. I didn't slide it across the table. I just let it sit in plain sight, like a loaded gun. Verna's lips thinned. Don't bring private documents into a public place? Oh, I'm sorry. Are we suddenly worried about discretion? A silence hung over us. Forks clinked on plates at nearby tables. A toddler dropped a spoon. Normal life swirled around our warped little booth. You've always been sensitive, Mom said, like a punch wrapped in lace. And this isn't about us not loving you. You just weren't in a place to take leadership. You were moving around, doing your own thing. The family needed stability. I leaned in. I was writing checks to keep the business afloat while Trenton was gambling in Atlantic City. Don't talk to me about stability. Trenton's jaw twitched. That was a long time ago. Right, so was my name being on the founder's plaque. Strange how history only fades when it's mine. I stood up slowly, pushing the folder gently back into my purse. I'm not here to ask for permission. I'm here to let you know. I won't be erased. Verna placed her hand on my wrist. Don't do this, Romy. You don't have to ruin us to make a point. I looked at her, really looked at her. I'm not trying to ruin you, I said. I'm just done letting you ruin me. I turned to leave. Trenton's voice, sharp and low, followed me out. You're gonna regret this. I paused in the doorway. You mean like forging an inheritance and thinking no one would notice? That night, I sat in my apartment, silence pressing against the walls. A text came in. Verna again. You don't have to go nuclear. Family should protect family. I stared at the message, deleted my first response, typed again. Family shouldn't steal from family. Then I attached a PDF of the trust clause. No caption, no explanation, just facts. I clicked send. The world didn't explode. But for the first time in weeks, something inside me settled. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew they weren't in control of it anymore. The message came through just before the sky slipped into dusk, that brittle moment between daylight and darkness. A text, short and polished like everything Trenton touched. Come by the house. Let's clear the air. No more surprises. Clear the air. That was rich, coming from people who'd built a dynasty on omission, secrets, and sleight of hand. If deceit were a currency, my family would be old money. Still, I went. Not because I wanted to make peace, not because I believed they'd changed, and definitely not because I expected an apology. I went because silence had run its course. I had facts now, not just suspicions. Proof, not just instinct. And they were finally going to listen, because I wasn't leaving until they did. The Gaskins house hadn't changed a bit. From the outside, it was still pristine. The lawn trimmed down to military precision, the hedges sculpted like topiary soldiers guarding some distorted version of honor. The American flag hung at half-mast on the porch, a relic from Dad's health scare months ago. No one had bothered to raise it again, like they were still milking the sympathy, or didn't know how to deal with anything after the crisis didn't kill him. Inside, though, things were different. The air carried that overly crisp smell of industrial lemon cleaner, the kind meant to scream, "We're fine," while barely concealing the stench of panic. It smelled like guilt dressed up for guests. Trenton opened the door with the same politician's grin he wore on campaign flyers and fundraising dinners. "Glad you came," he said, like this was a business meeting, like I hadn't seen through him months ago. "Let's just talk." I didn't answer. Words were cheap here. I followed him down the hall, passing family photos that had long since stopped meaning anything. Us on vacation, us at graduations, us pretending. In the living room, the rest of the players were in place. Mom sat rigidly, her lips pressed so tight they seemed to have retreated into her face entirely. Ezekiel was beside her, one leg jittering, an old tell when he was nervous. Dad was slumped in his recliner, staring at the blank TV. He gave me a slow nod, the kind that acknowledged presence without engagement. Whether he was too tired or just indifferent, I couldn't tell. I wasn't sure it mattered. On the coffee table sat a folder, slim, glossy, neat. It was white with gold embossed letters. Family Division Agreement, Final Draft. I didn't touch it. Trenton cleared his throat as if rehearsed. We thought this would help streamline things, make the transition cleaner, keep everything out of court, just define roles and responsibilities, make things official. Handled, I repeated softly. The word sat like acid on my tongue. I set my bag down beside the armchair and unzipped it slowly, letting the sound stretch. Then I pulled out my own folder, fatter, heavier, less sleek. It landed on the coffee table with a solid thunk. The sound made Verna flinch. Let's talk about what's actually been handled. One by one, I laid out the papers. The original notarized trust, with key clauses highlighted in angry yellow, especially the one requiring all siblings' consent before property transfers. The forged deed transfer, with a forensic comparison of Dad's signature now versus then. The USPS address change form that had rerouted estate notices away from me. A time-stamped access log from the family's primary bank account, showing exactly when I'd been locked out. And finally, the email. The one Charla had sent to Trenton, blind copying their lawyer, not realizing I was still on the CC list from months ago. Everything's in motion, just don't let her catch wind of the first draft. The room was dead quiet, like the oxygen had been sucked out. Verna inhaled sharply through her nose. Trenton's hands, resting on his knees, curled into fists. And then, as if choreographed, Charla walked in, late and breathless, clutching her designer purse like it could shield her from consequence. She froze when she saw me. This wasn't how we agreed to do this, she stammered. I raised a brow. You want to finish that sentence, or should we save it for court? Her eyes snapped to Trenton, then back to me, panicked. I was just notarizing what they gave me, she said quickly, the practiced ease of someone used to slipping out of blame. Trenton jumped in, voice low, pacifying. Romy, look, this escalated more than it was supposed to. You weren't supposed to find out? I said. Yes, I noticed. I tapped my phone and hit play. Charla's voice, clear and unmistakable, filled the room. Just don't let her see the old draft. She can't challenge it if she doesn't know it exists. The timestamp from last week glowed on the screen. The silence afterward was thick enough to choke on. Finally, Verna spoke, her voice brittle with a faux calm. We did what we thought was best for the family. You've always been emotional about these things, unpredictable. We needed a plan. You needed control, I said, cutting her off, and you assumed I wouldn't fight back. Ezekiel finally looked up. His voice was quiet, hesitant. This doesn't have to go public, Romy. I met his eyes. No, but it will. Charla's voice cracked. It wasn't just Trenton, okay? It wasn't all his idea. I turned to her, expression flat. Perfect. Then the deposition will be thorough. I stood, slung my bag over my shoulder. Trenton's voice, low now, almost desperate, followed me to the hallway. You really want to burn it all down? I stopped, turned back to face them. The four of them sat frozen, shocked not by what I'd said, but by the fact that I'd said it at all, like the script had gone off book and they didn't know their lines anymore. You think this is me lighting the match? I asked. You've been stacking the kindling for years. All I did was bring proof and a lighter. They stared, still waiting for me to cry or scream or beg. Instead, I smiled, a cold, quiet thing. I gave you a chance to fix this quietly, but you pushed too far, and you forgot something important. They blinked. Nice girls, I said. We don't stay quiet forever. Then I turned and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. The soft, deliberate click as it shut behind me was louder than any explosion. It was the sound of something ending, and something bigger beginning. By the time Monday morning arrived, I was already dressed, seated, and staring at the courthouse doors before the clock struck 8. Knoxville hadn't even warmed up for the day yet. The air still held the kind of chill that clung to skin and memory. Norelle met me on the courthouse steps, files in hand and expression unreadable. You ready? She asked. I nodded once. My voice wasn't needed. The paperwork would speak for me. Inside, the courthouse buzzed with routine, lawyers greeting clerks, murmurs of pending trials echoing through the halls. But when I handed over the folder marked Gaskins v. Gaskins Emergency Injunction and Asset Freeze, the room seemed to still just slightly. The clerk flipped through the exhibits, eyes scanning the forged signatures, the notarized trust with my name in bold, the digital logs, the audio transcripts. Everything's in order, she said. Stamp, stamp, stamp. I had walked into that building with a single goal, truth backed by proof. At 9 a.m. sharp, courtroom 2B opened. I stepped inside behind Norelle. Trenton, Verna, and Ezekiel were already seated. Trenton's lawyer fiddled with his tie like it was a noose. Charla was conspicuously absent. Judge Marshall Grant entered moments later. He was gray-haired and brisk, the kind of man who hated theatrics almost as much as he hated wasted time. Let's begin, he said, shuffling the files. As he read the first lines aloud, motion to freeze contested assets on the grounds of breach of trust, document forgery, and concealment of binding clause. I didn't look at my family. I didn't need to. I felt Trenton's gaze burning toward me, daring me to flinch. I didn't. The judge skimmed through the highlighted exhibits, occasionally raising an eyebrow. When Trenton's lawyer tried to interject, "Your Honor, these allegations are deeply personal and better suited for mediation," the judge shut him down with a wave. "I've read enough to understand the stakes. Let's hear from the petitioner." Norelle stood. Her tone was even, composed. One by one, she introduced the documents. The trust clause, the audio recording, the verified handwriting analysis, the email from Charla. "Your Honor," she said finally, "we're not here over misunderstandings. We're here because the respondents orchestrated a calculated removal of legal authority. My client has every right, legally and ethically, to halt that process." Judge Grant turned to me. "Miss Gaskins, do you intend to assume responsibility for the Gaskins estate?" I stood, clasping my hands in front of me. "I don't want power for the sake of it. But I won't let what was meant to protect me be twisted to erase me. I'm not here to punish them. I'm here to correct what they tried to bury." There was no response. Just quiet. The real kind. Not the silent treatment, not tension. Truth-filled quiet. 10 minutes later, the gavel dropped. Motion granted. All asset transfers made after the date of the trust clause activation are hereby frozen, pending full review. Court will reconvene in 30 days for formal disposition. That was it, but the fallout had just begun. By noon, word spread. Local news picked up the story. A financial blog leaked court documents. Investors, apparently less tolerant of scandal than siblings, pulled their funding from Gaskins Contracting within hours. Trenton stormed out of the building, flanked by his lawyer, his jaw clenched so tight it could have cracked glass. Verna didn't speak. She didn't look at me either, just held onto Ezekiel's arm and walked as if she were trying to disappear into the sidewalk. I didn't follow them. Outside, reporters shouted my name. "Miss Gaskins, are you taking over the company? Will you be pressing charges? Is this a family dispute or corporate sabotage?" I didn't answer. I kept walking, my heels striking the concrete like punctuation. That afternoon, I returned to the only place that hadn't tried to forget me, his study. The scent of cedar and old books lingered like he'd just stepped out. I placed the court order on his desk, right under his framed photo of the three of us from years ago. "You knew," I whispered. "You always knew they'd come for it, and you still trusted me to fight for it." I leaned back in his old chair and let the silence surround me, not to hide in it, but because this time, I owned it. The sun had shifted to a softer shade by the time I stepped back out onto the porch. The old swing creaked under me like it always had, the wood never complaining about weight, only time. Inside, the study felt like an anchor, unchanged and unafraid. I glanced back at the desk and reached for a dusty leather-bound album tucked beneath a drawer panel I'd almost forgotten about. Taped to the inside cover was the photo they'd once cropped me out of. Me, Trenton, Grandpa Jack, covered in paint, all three of us laughing in front of the first wall we ever built together. I pulled the frame from the bookshelf where the edited photo still sat. I swapped them, gently smoothing the corners flat as I closed the back of the frame. There, truth restored, not loudly, not with ceremony, but honestly. The news broke just before sunset. "Daughter exposes family fraud assets frozen in Gaskins estate dispute," read the Knoxville Sentinel's headline. It wasn't flashy. No clickbait, just black ink across white newsprint. Underneath the article were comments, some shocked, some sympathetic, many just silent likes and reposts. But there it was, my name, not attached to shame or erasure, not framed by someone else's narrative, just mine. Around dinner time, my phone buzzed, a message from Verna. "We didn't know how much we needed you, until you walked away." I let the screen dim. No reply. No rage, no rehash. Sometimes silence is the most honest answer you can give. By the end of the week, the dominoes had finished falling. Charla's license was suspended by the state board. The notary registry publicly updated her misconduct record. Her name faded fast from all the downtown business listings where it used to pop up like a reflex. Trenton was removed as acting CEO. Technically, he wasn't charged yet. But the silence that followed him was louder than any court sentence. Investors stopped returning calls. Vendors began redirecting invoices to the transitional committee. and word around town was that even his golf club revoked his membership. Ezekiel announced his retirement in a 2-line email. No farewell brunch, no gold watch. Verna stopped going to Sunday service. People noticed that kind of absence, but no one asked, because some kinds of shame speak for themselves. Back at Grandpa's house, I let myself settle into a slower rhythm. I opened the windows that hadn't been touched in years. Let spring light crawl across the floorboards like it had been waiting. Kids ran past the porch chasing kites, paper diamonds flapping wild against a peach-toned sky. One of them waved. I waved back. Inside, on the top shelf above Grandpa's law books, I spotted something that hadn't been there before. A folded paper crane. I don't know if he made it, or if someone else had slipped it between the pages. But I remembered the words he once whispered after my first loss in high school debate, when I'd come home crying because the judges called me too soft-spoken to command the room. "You're the one with wings," he'd told me, tapping my shoulder. "Just because they don't hear the wind yet doesn't mean you're not already flying." I smiled, not because it fixed anything, but because it reminded me that not everything needs fixing. Some things just need returning to where they belonged all along. I didn't go back to the company. I didn't run for the board or petition for title or replace nameplates. That was never the point. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stepped out onto the porch again, barefoot this time. The floorboards didn't creak anymore. I sat down, let the breeze move through the porch screen and into my lungs. I didn't need applause. I just needed air that didn't choke me. And finally, I could breathe. Sometimes justice doesn't look like a courtroom verdict. It looks like reclaiming the space you were once erased from and breathing in it like it always belonged to you. If this story taught me anything, it's this. Silence doesn't make you safe. It just makes you easier to ignore. For too long, I believed that being the nice girl meant swallowing unfairness to keep the peace. But peace built on erasure isn't peace, it's compliance dressed in politeness. So if you've ever felt pushed aside, underestimated, or told to be quiet and let it go, I'm here to tell you, you're not wrong for wanting to be seen. You're not selfish for standing up when no one else will. Sometimes, the legacy you're meant to protect is your own. And now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been left out by your own family, or had to fight for something that was yours all along? What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Let me know in the comments. Your story matters too. If this video touched you or gave you something to think about, drop a 1 in the comments, or tell me what city or state you're watching from. If it didn't speak to you, that's okay too. Tell me why. Tell me where you're tuning in from. Let's talk. And hey, if you want more stories like this, true stories that dig deep into real families, real heartbreak, and real courage, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You'll be the first to know when the next one drops. Until then, stay strong, stay smart, and never let anyone write you out of your own story.